What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench Podcast Network channel, giving a shout out to the rest of the crew: Shy, Kelvin, Jermaine, KB Film Room, Big Dog Talk Sports. That's right, that's right. For everyone who's tuning in, thank you for supporting Behind the Bench. Subscribe to the channel, help make the show the best that it can be. Now, this is what you call exclusive coverage right here, aka the Gold Nugget. And ironically, I didn't even really want to talk about this, man. I really didn't, but my heart moved me to do so. And I wanted to break down a different perspective that has not been considered, you know. And it is so controversial, and I'm not the type of person who tries to take away from people's enjoyments, or how can I say, looking back on moments that they celebrated. It's not about that, man. But on this rare occasion, man, this is where logic has to be applied. And this was a situation beyond everyone's control. You can't predict, you cannot prepare for a pandemic. You know what I'm saying? No matter where you live, no matter what your economic standing is, whether you're wealthy or middle class or working class or whatnot. It's not about that. But Daryl Morey, he got a lot of people worked up, man. He got a lot of people worked up on a statement that he said recently about the bubble championship, or the bubble in of itself. And if we really think about it, okay, let's look at how this is how you knew that how serious the pandemic was. And let's go back. This was around the middle of March of the year 2020, in particular, during the stretch run of the 2019-2020 NBA regular season, right? So up until that point where they decided to shut down play, 71 games had been determined pretty much for every team in the league. So 71 games. So when the pandemic hit and the commissioner made that announcement, it was on a Wednesday night. I won't forget it because I remember it was two games. One game had already started and they shut down the rest of the game. And then the second game was scheduled and they canceled that game altogether. So you knew this pandemic was real, And remember, what else takes place in the month of March? March Madness, the men and women's NCAA college basketball tournament, right? Okay, so the NCAA decided to shut down the tournament because they said they want to protect their student athletes, right? They did the right thing. And they stood to lose more money than the NBA because billions and billions of dollars are generated from that tournament alone in terms of the endorsements that they get from advertisers or whatnot to promote the tournament, right? Okay, so they did the right thing. And they didn't waste no time reaching that conclusion because they used logic, right? Now, Major League Baseball, the season had not started yet, but they was, conducting a spring training. So what they did was they came up with a plan where they didn't start the season until about 3 months in, when the season normally starts around the last day of March or the first week of April, right? So I believe Major League Baseball started that 2020 season around, I want to say, like July, somewhere around there, right? So they came up with a plan to protect his players while at the same time maintaining the integrity of the sport, right? To where by the time the postseason started, now they had it at a they did host the Major League playoffs at a specific venue, right? They did that. But by the time the World Series started, it felt like it was the integrity of it was legit. You know what I'm saying? And the outcome where the Dodgers, LA Dodgers, won the World Series. Okay, so there was really no controversy. Do you know that there was no controversy about whether the World Series was genuine? You don't hear no one in baseball, try to make that type of assertion, right? Okay, National Hockey League, they shut down play, and they shut it down immediately, right? Okay, so I believe that the commissioner of the NBA, I believe he was prepared to announce the cancellation for the full season. And that was my hope. And there were enough games played to where you can still determine who was the league MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Sixth Man of the Year, Coach of the Year, Most Improved Player of the Year, anything that I may have accidentally left out. So all your season awards still could have been applied for that season, to where you don't totally uphold what took place during that season. You see what I'm saying? Okay. So everything seemed logical until it was announced that they was going to stage this alternative means to finish the season out. And they coined it the bubble. See, they coined it the bubble. Okay, now check this out. This is one of them. Now, everybody's attacking Daryl Morey and what they said about him. Oh, he's never won anything. He bases his teams and performance on analytics, his approach to pursuing championships. Everything that they said about his career as GM or executive, everything they said was true. But what he said about the validity of the bubble is true. And that's why they so worked up. And one of the main reason I was concerned about the bubble, it really had nothing to do with the COVID per se. That was obvious. But the main reason I had trouble with it is because number one, they should have just totally canceled the season because of the uncertainty of the pandemic and how much of a threat it was, because people started to die from it, right? But also, when the bubble started, you had all this social unrest, with the incidents of police brutality versus citizens who couldn't really defend themselves. And I'm not gonna get off into the names and all that, and who got shot or who died from at the hands of police during that summer months. I'm not gonna get off into that. But my main concern was the timeline, because NBA players are not used to playing organized basketball at that level during the summer months. Their bodies is used to recuperating from the NBA season that they just completed during the summer months. My main concern was injury. And if you remember, when the bubble started around, they had to be late June, towards the last month of June. And it really got into high gear like about once the seeding round ended. That's when it started getting into high gear. A number of players suffered injuries like 1 week in, like Jonathan Isaac, the young center for the Orlando Magic. He suffered an ACL like 1 week in, and it took him 3 years to recover from that. So imagine if Jonathan Isaac did not play or was in a position to be asked to play during the summer months. Maybe Orlando Magic is further along in their progress as a team than they are right now. You see what I'm saying? And then Ben Simmons got hurt early on. I believe that first round, of the playoff, I believe Philadelphia played Boston in that first round, and then he suffered like a ACL, and they had to shut him down. He couldn't play. Also, players was out of shape. You can tell. Then a number of players and number of teams really didn't want to participate and didn't give full effort on the court. And when you don't give full effort on the court, you're more prone to suffering an injury. See, it's like a domino effect. So my main concern was injury. Also, this is why the outcome of the bubble in terms of who won it is always going to be questions behind it. And there's nothing that nobody can do. Because when you apply logic, you see the flawed nature of the entire attempt to stage that bubble. Now, the normal NBA offseason starts like the last week of June, right after the finals end. Just like this year's finals, Oklahoma City versus Indiana, the series ended around towards the last week of June, or the second to last week of June, around there, around June 20 something, right? Then the players entered the off season with the full month of July and the full month of August. That's 2 months. And then as they prepare for the new season to start, you have media day and then training camp. That take place around the middle of September, like by the either the end of the second week of September or the beginning of the third week of September. So when you combine that time frame, that equates to about 2.5 months. The bubble, after the league was shut down mid-March, did not debut until towards the last week of June, right after the summer season started. So when you break that down, that's over 3 months. So compare that time duration of over 3 months to a standard NBA offseason. Based on that criteria, the outcome of the bubble should not have even applied to the 2019-2020 season. Coupled with the fact that there was only one team that was reported to be practicing when the commissioner issued a statement in an attempt to protect all NBA players that they were not allowed to meet up or to conduct any basketball activities at their team's practice facility. And there was only one team reported that was doing such. And we know who that was. I don't need to mention no names. Also, what Daryl Morey, maybe he forgot to mention, is that when the bubble was announced, it was promoted and staged and structured, more importantly, structured as a tournament. Because before the playoffs started, they featured a seeding round. Just like in the NCAAs, when you have a seed, when they determine the seeds based off of the outcome of your conference tournament play, where you have your automatic bids, like teams that win a conference tournament, that's an automatic bid for the tournament, and then you have your teams right on the border, or they call them at-large bid teams that may barely get selected to participate based on strength of schedule, things of that nature. So the bubble borrowed that concept to frame up a seeding round for the kind of like the lower seeded teams that have a chance to qualify for the postseason in the bubble. The seeding round is what gave birth to the play-in tournament that started the next year. That's also controversial, because most fans would say that an 82 game schedule, 82 games is way more than enough games to determine if you're good enough to reach the playoffs. And based on the reaction to the play-in tournament over these past 5 years, many people feel that the play-in tournament devalues the regular season, because a lot of teams know in the back of their mind that they can rely on the play-in to qualify for the postseason just as long as they win the play-in, meaning that they may not give the full effort throughout the course of the regular season that teams normally did prior to introducing the play-in as a concept. So in theory, when you look at it, the bubble actually began the process of devaluing the regular season. And when the commissioner noticed that, that's when he came up with the idea of the in-season tournament to incentivize players to start the season playing with more purpose and more zeal. So when you look at it, the bubble actually devalued NBA basketball. See, this is deep. It goes beyond anybody's interest or beyond wanting to see a certain player win. Also, this is deep. The bubble concluded in late October when the Lakers won the bubble tournament. Because it was introduced, it was structured and billed as a tournament. But the carryover effect of that bubble started immediately, because players only really had a 2-week break from the point of the bubble concluding to when the new season started. So they condensed the draft, free agency, and any trade moves over the course of 2 weeks. Then the players had immediately started to get ready for the next season. They had about a week of training camp, which is, I believe it was actually less than it. Some teams only had 3-day training camp. And then preseason games on average was like 2 games. 2 to 3 games tops. All that activity in between seasons led to the 2020-21 season starting like within less than a month. And the players were not in shape, you can tell, and the play was sluggish. So what do you think is going to happen when you rush players who, first of all, weren't even used to competing during the summer months, being asked to prepare for a new season in less than 3 weeks' time? They're going to be susceptible to injuries. Not just like role players. We're talking about the superstars, the top players in the game. Maybe if it wasn't for that bubble, maybe Jamal Murray don't suffer that ACL during the second half of that season. Maybe Kawhi Leonard, he don't suffer that ACL in the postseason that followed. See, you can tell when a player is in shape because their game is more sound. You can tell. And when everybody's in shape, the play elevates. You have a high level of play. Remember, fans would complain about, man, they out there, man, they missing all these shots, man. Ain't nobody playing no defense, blase, because they weren't in shape. And I'm going to give you an example of a player who suffered from having to participate in that bubble. None other than Anthony Davis. Let's go back to the bubble finals, and I'm going to close this up. In Game 5, you can pull this, pull it up on YouTube. Game 5. This was about, I want to say, either the end of the first quarter, beginning of sometime in the second quarter. AD grimaced and grabbed the back of his Achilles. But the play-by-play commentators were saying, oh, man, he looked like he's favoring his calf. No, that was his Achilles. Okay. So, and he continued playing. And actually, he was very fortunate to not have injured that Achilles, because he'd more than likely been out the next 2 years. Now, by not having the proper time to recover and heal up, his threat of injury carried over to the following season, where he suffered multiple injuries that ultimately led him to miss over half the season, close to half the season. And that carried over to the next season. And he was getting criticized by these talking heads saying that he was not in shape. Well, the man was injured going into the following season. But when the timeline started to catch up with itself and started returning back to his normal frame 2 years later, he wasn't missing all them games that he had missed the 2 years that followed the bubble. But they're not going to mention this. And thus, he was dubbed street clothes. So what I'm saying is, when I look at the pros and the cons, my logic tells me they never should have had that bubble. They should have canceled the rest of the season. And if the team was good enough to pursue the championship, they could have did it the following year. And matter of fact, they'd have been more fresh to do it, to claim that they was the best team in the league. See, the league shortchanged itself by staging the bubble because the overall play suffered after the bubble, right? And actually, if you think about it, load management increased even more. I believe all of this was directly attributed to staging that bubble. It was not a natural basketball occurrence. And that's what Daryl Morey is referring to. Now, of course, if you participate in it, you're playing basketball, you're used to going out there playing ball. If you win it, of course, at that moment, you're going to celebrate it. But in all actuality, based on the fact that the bubble did not debut until almost 3.5 months after the commissioner shut down play due to the pandemic, the bubble should be viewed as its own entity. It should not be applied as an outcome of the 2019-2020 season based on that criteria. This is where the manipulation comes into play. You see what I'm saying? And I know this is rare, and I'm not trying to hate. And I'm not, no pun intended, I'm not trying to bust nobody's bubble. What I'm saying is the NBA took a hit because they tried to stage something based on outside influence and in response to the challenges that faced after the bubble, they had to come up with the plan, and eventually they had to come up with the in-season tournament to incentivize players to give full effort at the start of the season. It's all connected. If there's no bubble, there's no play-in. If there's no play-in, there's no in-season. And the reason a lot of people, if you notice, the people who support the bubble 100%, they support the play-in 100% and support the in-season tournament 100% because they know deep down it was a calculated event to benefit certain people. That's why they try to uphold it and say, well, that was the hardest championship to ever win, to manipulate people. How can you say which championship is the hardest ever to win when there's been like almost 80 NBA champions in its history? I'm telling you, man, the manipulation is off the charts. But if you break it down and use logic, you can navigate through this landmine and you can get to the truth of the matter. And that's what Daryl Morey is trying to say. Even though he's never won a championship. I'm not saying he's a great GM. But what he said about that bubble was true. And for those people who say, well, only reason they saying the bubble is fake because a certain guy won it or a certain team won it, it wouldn't have mattered who would have won it. If the Clippers would have won it, if the Milwaukee Bucks would have won it, if the Houston Rockets would have won it, Boston Celtics, Philadelphia 76ers, Portland Trail Blazers, Utah Jazz, Denver Nuggets, Miami Heat, Orlando Magic, it wouldn't have mattered. It still would have been viewed as questionable. That's why they shouldn't have had it. So now, to incentivize, they have to come up with these quote unquote ideas to encourage players to give full effort, and it's further devaluing the regular season. If you eliminate those two elements, the playing in the in-season tournament, watch what happens. I believe you will see less load management. Because now you know you got to pretty much give full effort throughout the course of the season to qualify for the playoffs. And that's really what this is all about. The bubble actually devalued postseason basketball. Do you notice that the talking heads uphold the bubble more than any champion that has followed it? Every year, when Milwaukee won the title, when Golden State won the title, when Denver won the title, when Boston won the title, and when OKC won the title, what did they talk more about? They talk more about that bubble during the off season. And they got thrown off their rocker when Daryl Morey came up in there, man, and gave them the business, dog. I'm telling you, man, it's deep. It's deep. But me personally, my main concern, the COVID was an entity within itself. It was a threat within itself that impacted all facets of society. So that was a given. But my main concern was injury. And we've seen more injuries, season-ending injuries, over these past 5 years than we have seen in the history of this league. And I believe it was due to how the bubble threw off the natural NBA timeline. That's my personal conclusion. Not my personal belief, but my personal conclusion. So that's my take on it. And I try to drop another golden nugget. But please leave your comments and thoughts. I'm curious to see what your response will be. And until next time, as I always love to say, this is JB or BTB, Behind the Bench.